Those images, of course, coming in from Colombo today, viewers, of the crisis now which has spilled over onto the streets of Colombo. Protesters, they're storming the presidential palace in Colombo. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his whereabouts are still unknown. He seems to have fled. My colleague Akshay Nath is still live with us. Akshay, you were on the ground in Colombo just a couple of months ago. When you spoke to the people over there, and then of course you witnessed the sort of, the ramifications of the economic crisis that were being felt on the ground, what did you see?
Well, Paulomi, I was in Sri Lanka during the time when people of Sri Lanka had attacked Temple Tree, which is the Prime Ministerial residence. This was around the first week of May, and we'd seen how Mahinda Rajapaksa, who was the then Prime Minister, had to step down. That was on May 9th. So following that, when India Today was there, we had seen and spoken to so many people at Golface who had tented up there and were continuously protesting against the Rajapaksas. They were continuously talking about how the country is in such a pitiful state only because of the Rajapaksas. So we have seen that the mentality of the general public there was to blame, Mahinda Rajapaksa and the other Rajapaksa family members who were part of the government back then. And we had also seen that as soon as Mahinda Rajapaksa had resigned, the next demand was that Gota go back. And this was a slogan which was echoed across the island nation. But we had seen that despite this kind of a sentiment going on there, Gotabaya Rajapaksa held on to his position. He said that he will serve his entire tenure and he will ensure that Sri Lanka will reel out of the current economic crisis that they're facing. But unfortunately, the person whom they had chosen as the Prime Minister was Ranil Wickremesinghe, who once again was a choice of the Rajapaksas, unlike the popular demand which was the most, the opposition leader, who was Sajith Premadasa. He was hinted out to be the right choice for the Prime Ministerial candidate because he and his party had the second highest number of votes and supports and MLAs in the Parliament is concerned. But what we had seen was completely different picture. Ranil Wickremesinghe, a very experienced politician, had stepped in, and even after that the scenario in Sri Lanka did not change, and that had brought in a lot of piled up anger. What they had expected out of the new Prime Minister was to bring in an action plan wherein they will be able to come out of the economic crisis. But unfortunately we had seen how Sri Lankan government was not able to fix up a proper economic plan. They were not able to get the support of IMF or the World Bank or any other monetary funds, or a majority nations whom they approached also were not able to support them. And also one needs to know how much can an external party can help a scenario in Sri Lanka. This is a crisis which was created in the island nation itself. If you see the kind of revenue that Sri Lanka gets, it's mainly from tourism and then from agriculture, whereas all other things are imported into Sri Lanka. They don't really have a good system of manufacturing or a way in which they can employ their the general public. So there was a public anger that they were not able to do well, and the public were suffering because of the kind of planning and schemes that were brought in by the Rajapaksas and the leaders back then. And at this point again the same anger is what has brought the public once again to Golface and also to the Janatipati Mawata, and we're seeing the kind of breaching into these fortified areas which are well secured areas. This is all the piled up anger of the general public, and their demand that they want a change is being reflected in the action also. How much can a government control the raging public, a mob-like public? Is what we're seeing here. They are not being able to do that, and despite all the curfew that was put for this island nation, once the curfew was lifted at 8 AM today, all of those people who wanted to protest have come out on streets, and we're being told that by every passing minute the number of people who are gathering at Golface and the other public areas is only increasing. And what is the solution for it? Well, it is a big question mark, because right now we're seeing that the government missionaries, which is led by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, has requested the Speaker to call for a meeting. A new government has to be formed is the suggestion given by the SLPP leaders. But how much of a time will all this process forces take, and when will this scenario come to a control? All this is a big question, because we're saying that the kind of forces that they can use on this public is also limited, and they are outrun by the kind of public force that we can see there on ground. So at the moment, Sri Lanka, the island nation, which is generally known as a very peaceful nation, is at its worst scenario, and the president who had promised to take care of the country till his term gets over has fled the nation, fled the region. We don't even know his whereabouts at this point of time. Follow me.
Right, Akshay, given that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has been defiant through this entire time when there have been calls for his resignation, what are the chances that today, looking at the rage and the anger of the protesters who have stormed into his presidential residence, who have stormed into the secretariat, he will in fact step down wherever he is, from wherever he is?
Well, the pressure is on Gotabaya for the last 92 odd days, Paulami. We need to understand from day one the demand of these public who are raging and who have been on the ground is for Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign. And right now the scenario is such that the people have clearly shown their mandate. They've clearly shown that they do not want a leader who is named Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who is holding the position right now. And the only option that is left for him is to step down. In fact, we had even seen that Sajid Premadasa, who was seen as the best contender for the prime ministerial post, had back then said that his party will form a government only and only if Gotabaya Rajapaksa would step down. And because of this very demand, did we see that the offer of being the prime minister was handed over to Ranil Wickremesinghe. And now with the kind of scenario that we're seeing in Sri Lanka, it's very unlikely that Gotabaya Rajapaksa will be able to continue in his position any longer, and he will have to step down sooner or later. That is the kind of scenario that has come up, and it's very clear that if he is going to come back into the city of Colombo, then the repercussions that he and his family will have to face is going to be the mob-like scenario, mob-like crowd that have thronged into his residence, and that is not something the Rajapaksas with any number of supporters or any number of police force will be able to handle. That was what we have witnessed in the last couple of hours also. And talking about the next possible scenario for Sri Lanka, we have been told by senior member of parliament that they will be demanding for an entirely new government to be formed, and this time the government will have members of all the parties, and there will be a new prime ministerial person also appointed, which means that Ranil Wickremesinghe, the current prime minister, might also be facing a lot of resistance from his fellow parliamentarians. And just to go back a few days prior, Paulami, just to give you a recap, we had seen how in the Parliament House also members of the Parliament had raised slogans against Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and the continuous sloganeering forced Gotabaya to leave out of the Parliamentary House. So the sentiments among the parliamentarians as well as the general public is very clear. When Mahinda Rajapaksa had to resign on the 9th of May, we had seen how at least Rajapaksa, the Gotabaya Rajapaksa, was trying to step forward and saying that, he will manage the show and he will ensure that a new prime minister, new government will be in place, and Mahinda Rajapaksa and all other Rajapaksas will be removed. And keeping in consistence with that word of his, on June 9th, we had seen how Basil Rajapaksa, who was the then finance minister of the Sri Lankan government, also stepped down. And now, a month later, July 9th, we're seeing another big resistance being showcased by the general public, and with the kind of crowd that is coming into Golf-Face, the sea-facing area in Sri Lanka's Colombo, things are only getting heated up, and it really needs to be seen how this can be brought into control. The only way that we can see is that by Gotabaya Rajapaksa, from wherever he is, announcing that he will be stepping down and not interfering with the governments there.